Demonology and Devil Lore, Volume 1, Part 1, Demonology, Chapter 1, Dualism, Origin of Deism, Evolution from the far to the left, Illustrations from Witchcraft, the Primitive Pantheism, the Dawn of Dualism. A college in the state of Ohio has adopted for its motto the words, "Orient thyself." This significant admonition to Western youth represents one condition of attaining truth in the science of mythology. Through neglect of it, the glowing personifications and metaphors of the East have too generally migrated to the West, only to find it a Medusa turning them to stone. A prosaic literalism changes their ideals to idols. The time has come when we must learn rather to see ourselves in them, out of an age and civilization where we live in habitual recognition of natural forces. We may transport ourselves to a period and region where no sophisticated eye looks upon nature. The sun is a chariot drawn by shining steeds and driven by a refulgent deity. The stars ascend and move by arbitrary power or command. The tree is the bower of a spirit. The fountain leaps from the urn of a naiad. In such gay costumes did the laws of nature hold their carnival until science struck the hour for unmasking. The costumes and masks have with us become materials for studying the history of the human mind, but to know them, we must translate our senses back into that phase of our own early existence, so far as is consistent with carrying our culture with us. Without conceding too much to solar mythology, it may be pronounced tolerably clear that the earliest emotion of worship was born out of the wonder with which man looked up to the heavens above him. The splendors of the morning and evening, the azure vault, painted with frescoes of cloud or blackened by the storm, the night crowned with constellations, these awakened imagination, inspired awe, kindled admiration, and at length adoration. In the beginning, who had reached intervals in which his eye was lifted above the earth, amid the rapture of Vedic hymns. To these sublimities we meet sharp questionings, whether there be any such gods as the priests say, and suspicion is sometimes cast on sacrifices. The forms that peopled the celestial spaces may have been those of ancestors, kings, and great men, but anterior to all forms was the poetic enthusiasm which built heavenly mansions for them, and the crude cosmologies of primitive science was probably caught up by this spirit and consecrated as slowly as scientific generalizations now are. Our modern ideas of evolution might suggest the reverse of this. The human worship began with things low and gradually ascended to high objects. That from rude ages, in which adoration was directed to stock and stone, tree and reptile, the human mind climbed by degrees to the contemplation and reverence of celestial grandeurs. But the accord of this view with our ideas of evolution is apparent only. The real progress seems here to have been from the far to the near, from the great to the small. It is indeed probably inexact to speak of the worship of stock and stone, weed and wart, insect and reptile, as primitive. There are many indications that such things were by no race considered intrinsically sacred, nor were they really worshipped until the origin of their sanctity was lost, and even now, ages after their oracle or symbolical character has been forgotten. The superstitions that have survived in connection with such insignificant objects point to an original association with the phenomenal of the heavens. No religions could, at first glance, seem wider apart from the worship of the serpent and that of the glorious sun. Yet many ancient temples are covered with symbols combining sun and snake, and no form is more familiar in Egypt than the solar serpent standing erect upon its tail with rays around its head. Nor is this high relationship of the adored reptile found only in regions where it might have been raised up by ethnical combinations as a mere survival of a savage symbol. William Craft, an African who resided for some time in the kingdom of Dahomey, informed me of the following incident which he had witnessed there. The sacred serpents are kept in a grand house, which they sometimes leave to crawl in their neighboring grounds. One night, a man from some distant region encountered one of these animals and killed it. The people, learning that one of their gods had been slain, seized the stranger, and having surrounded him with a circle of brushwood, set it on fire. The poor wretch broke through the circle of fire and ran, pursued by the crowd, who struck him with heavy sticks. Smarting from the flames and blows, he rushed into a river, but no sooner had he entered there than the pursuit ceased, and he was told that, having gone through fire and water, he was purified and might emerge with safety. Thus, even in that distant and savage region, serpent worship was associated with fire worship and river worship, which have a wide representation in both Aryan and Semitic symbolism. To this day, the Orthodox Israelites set beside their dead before burial the lighted candle and a basin of pure water. These have been associated in rabbinical mythology with the angels Michael, genius of water, and Gabriel, genius of fire, but they refer both to the phenomenal glories and the purifying effects of the two elements, and reverenced by the Africans in one direction and the Parsis in another. Not less significant are the facts which were attested in the witch trials. It was shown that for their pretended divinations they used plants, as rue and vervain, well known in the ancient northern religions, and often recognized as examples of tree worship. But it also appeared that around the cauldron a mock zodiacal circle was drawn, and that every herb employed was alleged to have derived its potency from having been gathered at a certain hour of the day or night, a particular quarter of the moon, or from some spot where sun or moon did or did not shine upon it. Ancient planet worship is, indeed, still reflected in the habit of village herbalism. Of village herbalists, who gather their simples at certain phases of the moon, or at certain of those holy periods of the year which conform more or less to the pre-Christian festivals. These are a few out of many indications that the small and senseless saints, which have become almost or quite fetishes, were by no means such at first, but were mystically connected with the heavenly elements and splendors, like the animal forms in the zodiac. One of the earliest hymns of the Rig Veda, it is said, "This earth belongs to Varuna, the king, and the wide sky. He is contained also in this drop of water." As the sky was seen reflected in the shining curve of a dewdrop, even so in the shape of color, or a leaf or flower, the transformation of a chrysalis, or the burial and resurrection of a scarab egg, some sign could be detected making it answer in place of the typical image which could not yet be painted or carved. The necessities of expression would, of course, operate to invest the primitive conceptions and interpretations of celestial phenomenon, which those pictorial images, drawn from earthly objects, of which the early languages are chiefly composed, in many cases, that are met in the most ancient hymns. The designations of exalted objects are so little descriptive of them, yet we may refer them to a period anterior to the formation of that refined and complex symbolism by which primitive religions have acquired a representation in definite characters. The Vedic comparisons of the various colors of the dawn to horses, or the rain clouds to cows, denotes a much less mature development of thought than the fine observation implied in the connection of the forked lightning with the forked serpent tongue and forked mistletoe, or symbolization of the universe in the concentric folds of an onion. It is the presence of these more mystical and complex ideas in religions which indicate a progress of the human mind from the large and obvious to the more delicate and occult, and the growth of the higher vision, which can see small things in their large relationships. Although the exaltation in the Vedas of Varuna as king of heaven, and as contained also in a drop of water, it is in one verse, we may well recognize an immense distance in time between the two ideas there embodied. The first represents the primitive pantheism, which is the counterpart of ignorance. An unclassified outward universe is the reflection of a mind without form and void. It is, while all within is as yet undiscriminating wonder, that the religious vesture of nature will be this undefined pantheism. The fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil has not yet been tasted. In some of the earlier hymns of the Rig Veda, the Maruts, the storm deities, are praised along with Indra, the sun, Yama, king of death, is equally adored with the goddess of dawn. No real foe of yours is known in heaven nor in earth. The storms are thy allies. Such is the high optimism of sentences found even in sacred books, which elsewhere mask the dawn of the dualism, which ultimately supersedes the harmony of the elemental powers. I create light and I create darkness. I create good and I create evil. Look unto Yazdan, who casteth the shadow to fall. But it is easy to see that must be the result when this happy family of sun god and storm god and fire god and their innumerable coordinate divinities shall be divided by discord, when each shall have become associated with such earthly object or fact, he or she will appear as friend or foe, and their connection with the sources of human pleasure and pain will be reflected in collisions and wars in the heavens. The rebel clouds will be transformed to titans and dragons. The adored Maruts will be no longer storm heroes with unsheathed swords of lightning, marching as the retinue of Indra, but fire-breathing monsters, Dritras and Ahis, and the morning and evening shadows from faithful watchdogs become the treacherous hellhounds like Orthos and Cerberus. The vehement antagonisms between animals and men and of tribe against tribe will be expressed in the conception of struggles among gods, who will thus be classified as good or evil deities. This was precisely what did occur. The primitive pantheism was broken up. In its place, the later ages beheld the universe as the arena of a tremendous conflict between good and evil powers, who severely, in the process of time, marshaled each and everything from a world to a worm under their flaming banners.